Okay, so Morningstar, book 3 of the Red Rising Trilogy. Here are my thoughts. So Morningstar is obviously the third and final book of the original Red Rising Trilogy. As you can see behind me, there are 2 more out currently, which are Iron Gold and Dark Age. That is the second trilogy, takes place about a decade in the future. We'll get to those later. We're talking about Morningstar right now. So Morningstar is the culmination of this entire original trilogy, with Darrow at the focus. The stakes in this trilogy have never been higher than they are in Morningstar, because again, this is the third and final chapter of this story. And with that, it's kind of the finale, if you will, of this war that's been raging since book 1. What I loved about Morningstar was that, for me personally, it's very rare that I find that an author or director really sticks the landing with the finale of a story. And Pierce Brown did such a good job of, in my opinion, sticking the landing here and really wrapping this story up beautifully. And I absolutely love the way that this story finishes. Just from the character work to the world building to the stakes, the intense situations that these characters face, I honestly couldn't have done it better myself. Of course not. I'm not an author. What am I talking about? I couldn't imagine this book finishing any differently, because while, you know, you do lose characters here and there, and you do see the sheer scope of what this, you know, war has led to in this world, the way that it ends, I think, was just phenomenal. And I'm very happy with where it ended. And honestly, this could end as just this trilogy and I would be satisfied. I'm more than happy to read more of Pierce Brown, because I love this trilogy now so much that I'm gonna read everything this guy writes. But if the second trilogy didn't exist, I would have been perfectly content 100% with this story. I love it. It was fantastic. So stepping back briefly just to talk a little bit about the characters and the story without spoiling anything. Obviously, from book 1, where Darrow starts out as a 16-year-old kid, and he's kind of thrust into this situation that I don't think he ever would have expected to be in, he is now a man. This trilogy spans roughly 6 to 7 years. I think by the end of the third book, it's a little bit between 6 and 7 years. So he's in his early 20s. So you grow a lot with these characters, and there's no crazy, unwarranted time jumps between the books, in my opinion. Obviously, there are, you know, a couple of years that these span, but there's nothing like a chapter ends and all of a sudden it's like 5 years later or anything like that. So you really get a feel for how these characters of, you know, book 1, Darrow, Severo, Mustang, the Jackal, just this entire cast, Cassius, how they grow from teenagers that are put in this society, you know, this caste system based on their color, and they're told, you know, golds rule, reds are slaves. You know, the entire premise and world that these characters grew up in really peaks in Morningstar, because you're kind of peeling back the onion. You're getting to see behind the scenes of like how the society was really built and whether or not it should continue this way. And obviously, if you're a follower of Darrow and of Red Rising, you want to see this entire thing torn down and start fresh, because the caste system is terrible to everybody that's pretty much not a gold, because they're in charge of everything. And the way that this book wraps up that entire storyline after everything that these characters have been through, I wouldn't change a thing. Severo is far and away my favorite character of this trilogy. He's hilarious, he's violent, he's crazy, and he's so wonderfully written. He kind of reminds me a little bit of just kind of like mannerisms and a little bit craziness of Floki from Vikings, this guy right here, but heightened even beyond his kind of insanity. And he's hilarious. He's always swearing. He's always, talking crap to everybody. He's my favorite character. I really grew to feel for Darrow and his struggles. Just his entire quest that he's on and the way that he grows as a character is by far one of the best characters that I've seen written in recent memory. But just, honestly, the entire cast grows so much throughout this trilogy that it's truly remarkable work by Pierce Brown to make me feel so emotionally attached to these characters, because most of the time I am not that attached to the characters that I read in the book. And I didn't want to lose anybody in this story. And because of, you know, the twists and turns that it takes, not everybody's going to make it through, and that's fine. And I understand why the characters that either don't make it or do make it are chosen, because it serves the story in such a great way, and none of it feels unearned, or it's not like everybody has plot armor as we see in many other stories or later seasons of a story that used to be good. But just everything was so well done in my opinion, and I absolutely adore this trilogy. I don't want to spoil anything for Morningstar in this first half of this review because I am keeping it spoiler free. But having said that, just final thoughts for spoiler free section is I absolutely love this book. I love the character work. I love the world building. I love the way it's written. It's so engaging and easy to read. The pacing is well done, from, you know, Red Rising, where the pacing was a little bit hit or miss and then kind of picked up towards the end. And then you go to Golden Sun, which is just relentless, nonstop, action-packed. I mean, serious page turner. And then you get to Morningstar, where it takes kind of a step back, but for good reason, and then kind of ramps up again. And by the time you get to the finale, it's that crazy, intense, action-packed sci-fi goodness that this trilogy has brought the entire time. So that's going to wrap up my spoiler-free section. Hope you all enjoyed this trilogy as much as I did, but let's get into some spoiler talk. So spoiler talk, I'm really just going to hit on a few key things that I loved so much about this book in particular, as well as the trilogy as a whole. So like I said in the spoiler-free chat, the character growth is phenomenal. I mean, you start out with a cast of 16-year-olds that are getting into this academy style setting and Hunger Games-ish scenario of fighting each other, and just a whole ton of messed up crap is happening. Jackal is cannibalizing people. Kids are getting killed. I mean, this is violent crap. And the Golds basically just don't value life, it seems. And you realize that, you know, Augustus is cheating for his son to win, and Darrow's like, you know, screw all that crap. Slag that, as he would say. So you get through, you know, the first one, you know, pledging himself to Augustus, and then you go into Golden Sun, where just crap goes insane. And the way that that book ended, with the triumph ceremony and Roke and Jackal turning on everybody and killing Augustus, shooting Victra in the back, you know, killing Arcos. The way that that book ended, I can only imagine how people felt reading this when it came out, because I think I mentioned that in my Golden Sun review, that if I had read that at the time and had to wait for Morningstar to actually be out and I didn't have it sitting right next to me, I would have just been, you know, losing my mind over that. So Morningstar, though, because of the ending of that and Darrow being kidnapped and tortured, I mean, he was tortured for a year, for God's sake. He was, you know, well, tortured and then put into solitary confinement, which, you know, is a torture in itself. And just the realization that he was kept inside of a table that they were all sitting at and eating is just so messed up. So they're all sitting there laughing at him. He thinks he's in some cell somewhere, and he's literally just in this guy's dinner table, and they're all just dogging him the entire time. So he's completely broken. Jackal immediately, chapter 1 and 2 of this book is just like, wow, this guy is the literal spawn of Satan. Just the kind of crap that he's into, the way he tortures his pink and like cut out her tongue, and just he was totally messed up. He deserves to die. And then learning that Severo never gave up on him. They, you know, the Sons of Ares break him out. Like that whole scene was intense. I mean, obviously you lose some new characters along the way. You lose Trig. Him and Holiday were actually pretty interesting, and when they break out Victra, of course you knew something was going to happen. Someone was going to have to be sacrificed to make that happen, and fortunately it was Trig, who you just met, but you kind of feel bad for him anyway because his sister's there. But then you learn that, you know, Severo had shown his carving to everybody because he was publicly executed on TV. So I don't know who they killed to make look like him, but it convinced everybody except for Severo that he was dead. And, you know, Darrow learns that Mustang has actually been keeping up this war. She's been fighting with the Sovereign, and she's losing. So it's just kind of like a rush of emotions for him. And you can see just the struggle that he went through this entire trilogy, with this thrust upon him and him constantly battling internally with, you know, how am I going to do this? Am I strong enough to do this? Like, before this book, you know, everything about him was a facade, and he didn't want to get close to anybody, even though he was, and he became very good friends with them, but he knew eventually he'd have to turn on them because they're golds. And just the amount of people that saw past that and still looked to him as the Reaper and as their leader was just fantastic. And then you get to what was one of my favorite scenes of the book, is when they break in to Quicksilver's, I guess, hideout or wherever he was at, and they bust into the room just expecting to find him, and you see Cassius and Mustang and all these people sitting there because they were having a peace meeting. So they ruin that. They get into a big firefight. People are taken hostage. You know, Mustang gets out, Cassius gets out, but like Mustang is beating the shit out of Darrow and is about to kill him, and like half of his mask is off. And I was like, dude, just pull your mask off. Be like, it's me, stop. And she sees his face, and she's just like, Darrow? Like, I saw you die. And he's like, nah, I'm alive. And then, so like that, you know, messes with her head. And then you get to that scene where Mustang is basically like, has Darrow at gunpoint in those tunnels. And like Ragnar comes to his side, and Darrow's just like, look, like, I've been completely transparent with you, like, this is who I am, like, are you with me or not? And then it just like, that chapter ends and you don't see her for a little bit. And I was just like, oh my god, don't pull this crap, like, she has to understand at this point, right? So like, that was super cool. Going to Ragnar's planet and getting shot down by Cassius and fighting with those like savage tribal obsidians was so cool, because they're just absolute, you know, mindless monsters. It was insane. And just the descriptions of like Cassius's ship and his crew just being impaled on the ceiling and like being eaten alive, it was super grim dark, in my opinion, the way that this book ends up going. But like Ragnar and them fighting Aja and Cassius nearly killing Darrow and then taking an arrow through the throat, Ragnar going toe to toe with Aja only to fall, and then of course Aja escapes. I'm like, well, she's coming back later. So we lost Ragnar. I did tear up a little bit because I had really started to feel for Ragnar. He was kind of like a gentle giant, but also a malicious animal. But just, you kind of see that plan falling apart, and Aaliyah, however you pronounce his mom's name, is like, kill all these heathens. They're telling us that our gods don't exist. And just that scene with, you know, Sephi taking them up, I guess as prisoners, up to like Mount Olympus or whatever it equated to, where they had their gods there, and they kill them, and like right before they die, Mustang's like, look, it's Proctor, whatever, Neptune, or Mercury, whichever Proctor it was, but they're like, they realized that the Proctors were posing as gods to these people, and they convinced Sephi, like, okay, these are not gods, they're men, they can be killed, you've been lied to and enslaved this whole time. And they go back in front of Aaliyah, and she's like, kill them all, and Sephi's like, cuts her head off. And then they have the Obsidians on their back, so that was awesome. So they take them into space battle after like Darrow has this interaction at the Rim with Roke and the Moon Lords, and him and Mustang have to convince them to back them instead of Roke. So they basically took that information about the Jackal and all the nukes that he found and pinned that on Roke and said, look, these guys have nukes, they're willing to drop them. So they convinced him to side with them, and then there's like this giant space battle. Roke is on the Colossus just shredding Mustang and a bunch of the fleet. Darrow like tears a massive hole in his ship, and they land thousands of Obsidians and him and Victra and Severo. So they're tearing through the ship. They get to the bridge because a Pink let them through. And they're like, Roke, all right, you lost, but you don't have to die, like, come with us, blah, blah, blah. And then they allow Roke to kill himself because he's like, no, like, I could never side with you. Like, I would always try to kill you, whatever he said. So he kills himself. And I honestly don't remember what happened. I feel like the Sovereign or somebody broadcasted something to everybody, but basically kind of like a little civil war starts happening where the Obsidians are killing a bunch of golds, just like slaughtering them, and Reds are killing golds, and there's like all this infighting that happens in the army, and Sephi's like about to kill Cassius, and Severo pops out and he's like, hey, he's mine. Like, he killed Fitchner, he killed my father. This guy's a murderer, but he's my property. So I'm like, okay, so he just saved Cassius. That's kind of cool. And then everybody around him is just like, you can see they're eager for Cassius to die. Like, they want blood. They want this gold to die. And Severo gives this fantastic speech where he's just like, this man's a murderer. He killed my father. He killed sons of Ares. He's like, and what do we do with murderers? We kill them. And like hangs them, kicks them off the ledge. So Cassius is dangling there dying. Darrow look panicked. And then immediately Severo does the craziest shit he's done in this entire trilogy, where he nooses himself. And he's like, I'm a murderer. I've killed, hundreds of people. I've killed 19 golds and 27 silvers, and rattles off all these numbers. He's like, and what do we do to murderers? We kill them. And he backflips and hangs himself. And I'm sitting there just like, this man is certified insane. So they're both hanging. And like no one's helping them. And I'm just like, cut them off. What are you doing? And Sephi's actually the one that cuts them both loose. And they all kind of realize, okay, like, they're not just guilty because they've killed people. We're all murderers. We all kill people. Like, let's work together. And then you get to the scene, which is clear foreshadowing, which I should have seen coming, maybe. But I thought it was a setup the entire time that was going to get Darrow killed, actually. When Cassius and Darrow are having a drink together and they're talking and saying, how did it come to this? What happened to us? Blah, blah, blah. And then as Cassius is leaving, Darrow's like, look, I have this hollow cube, whatever it was. Watch this. I don't think you're going to want to be in this war after this because, like, what are you fighting for? And then you don't hear about the holotape again. And then you learn the next couple scenes that Darrow had it set up to allow Cassius to leave in basically a crate container, be shipped out of the docks. No one's going to know that he's gone. He's just sending him off to safety, saying, like, don't come back here and fight us. I just want you to get out of here. And so they're on the docking station. Antonia, who Victra beat the ever-living crap out of, is in a cell next to Cassius, and they release Cassius. It's Mustang, Severo, and Darrow. They say their goodbyes, and they're like, okay, no one's going to stop you. Get in this crate so we can smuggle you out. We're going to send you to safety. And Cassius holds out a hand to Severo to shake his hand, and Severo, had previously forgiven him for killing Fitchner, like he was just doing his duty. And right when I was reading, he was like reaching out for Severo. I was like, Pierce Brown, if you are about to do what I think you're going to do, I am going to hate you. And sure enough, Severo shakes his hand. Cassius grabs him, pulls his gun out, puts it to Severo's head. And I'm just like, cool, so Severo's gonna die. You guys are gonna get kidnapped, and everything's gonna go to shit. And then, sure enough, Severo's like, oh, you idiot. Like, I have my razor. You're too close to me, and tries to kill Cassius. Cassius catches his razor, shoots Severo point blank 6 times, kills him. He's bleeding out everywhere. Darrow's holding him and crying. Mustang's like yelling at Cassius. Cassius releases Antonia. They take both of them. They shove them all in the crate. So like Darrow's on the bottom. Severo's bloody dead body is on top of him. Mustang is there. And they, smuggle them out. Fly straight to the Sovereign, who the Jackal and all their ships were not on Mars. They were sitting here. So they're like, all right, perfect. Darrow fell into our trap. Like, now we just get to obliterate them because they think we're on Mars. I'm like, cool. So, I mean, unless this is all some elaborate plan by Darrow and Mustang, like, they're just dead. It is not good. So naturally, I should have seen a twist coming, but I was just so distraught that this happened that I was just like, okay, I don't know how they're going to get out of this. And then, Cassius cuts Darrow's hand off, and they take them in front of the Sovereign, and the Sovereign is broadcasting what is going to be his execution to the entire solar system. And just like the greatest thing in the world happens, where Darrow's sitting there handcuffed, and he just looks over to Cassius right as she's like reading the last thing before Jackal kills him, and just goes, ow, and just lets out this crazy howl. And Cassius just, that's the sign, boom, 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 just whips out his razor, just slaughters the guards right next to him, puts his sword through one dude's mouth, pulls it out. And then that's Darrow's cue. He jumps up with a knife and just like stabs the Sovereign a bunch of time, like rakes it across her stomach, so she's bleeding out. Mustang grabs a pulse rifle. So they start fighting everybody. They start fighting the jackal. Darrow actually pins the jackal down with his razor, like stakes him to the ground. And it comes down to Cassius, Mustang, and Darrow against Aja. They're all bloodied and battered. Darrow has one hand. They're trying to fight Aja, and she's just kicking their asses. Like, all three of them. She's playing with them. She's toying with them. You know, Cassius is getting cut up. Mustang's getting cut up. And it gets to a point where Darrow is... It's like Aja, Darrow, and then Mustang and Cassius are in the middle. And Darrow's crawling away. And Aja's like, don't you run from me. Like, I'm going to kill you, Reaper. And Cassius throws him, like, a stim pack or whatever the adrenaline shots are. And I was just like, all right, awesome. Like, he's just going to inject that, and he's going to go, you know, adrenaline crazy and hop up all juiced up. But then it's like he's crawling over to Severa's body. And that's when it clicked. I'm like, oh, shit. Like, what Cube about? Like, is Severo alive? And he jams it into Severo's chest, and it's like, wakey, wakey, goblin. And Severo's just like, ah! And jumps up, and he's like, what the hell, man? So Severo was alive the whole time, and then he gets his swords out. He's like, I'm coming to kill you, Aja. And, like, steps on Jackal's face, pulls the razor out of the ground, and they, you know, fight and kill Aja. Cut off her head. The Sovereign's dying. Jackal's laying there bleeding, and they turn to kill the Jackal, and he's like, nope, stop right there. He's like, this earpiece right here, I've been talking to the ship. I have all these nukes planted all over the moons, and if you don't turn yourselves into me and bow right now, I'm gonna kill everybody with nukes. And they're like, what are you talking about? No, you're not. He's like, launch section B, whatever he says. And nuke goes up, and they're watching it on the radar, and they just see it drop. 5 million people dead. And they're just like, what the hell? And Mustang's like, brother, you can't do this. Like, this is insane. He's like, don't call me brother. Like, don't try to play that crap with me now. Launch another one. Boom, 6 million people dead. And Cassius is just, like, horrified. Like, dude, you just killed 6 million people. What are you doing? And he's like, this could all stop right now, Darrow, if you just kill yourself. He's like, one life for billions. That's all you have to do. And Darrow, you know, just all these thoughts are running through Darrow's head. Like, I can't do this because there's no guarantee that he lets any of them go. He'll probably kill them. He'll probably still launch the nukes. And, you know, every minute a nuke is going off. And Darrow's just like, no. And punches Jackal in the throat. He's like, falls back. Darrow jumps on top of him. And he was just like, he's like, the only thing I can think of is to get you to stop talking. Because that's your power. Rips his tongue out. Just straight up tongue rips the Jackal. And so he's sitting there like gurgling on his own blood. Nukes are going off. So they call up the Moon Lords, or they call up the Ash Lords, sorry. And they're like, all right, this guy is launching nukes. You got to blast them out of the sky. So they blast them out of the sky. And then it kind of wraps up with them taking the, you know, the staff of the Sovereign or the scepter, and they're walking out of the gates towards the Senate building, and just ranks and ranks of soldiers are falling in behind them because they're like, all right, these guys clearly killed the Sovereign. We all just watched that. These are the new leaders. They walk into the Senate floor, and they're just like, all right, shit's gonna change. We're in charge now. Like, things are gonna be different. And then that's really where it wraps up. Prior to the epilogue, like that whole just mess of scenes was just some of the greatest reads that I've had all year. And then you get to the epilogue, of course, and it's wrapping up with Marrow, Mustang, and Darrow. All right, I'm shipping Marrow. That's a thing now. They're talking, and Darrow's like, so did I pass your test? And Mustang's like, oh, so you knew about that, huh? And he goes, well, yeah, I've kind of figured you were testing me, you know, so how did I do? And Mustang just says, you know, I knew that you could kill, I knew that you could lead, I needed to see that you could build, and that we could really have a future. And so I have something to show you. And it cuts to a scene where, like, Severo, Darrow's mom, a couple other people are, you know, walking out, and you see Darrow's mom is holding a child. And I almost got a tear because I was just like, oh my god, they have a kid. That's fantastic. It's the one time they had sex, like last book or whatever it was. And Mustang's like, Darrow, this is our son, Pax. I'd like for you to meet him. And so, like, that moment was just so beautiful to me. But also, like, as beautiful as an ending as it was, with, you know, Cassius kind of going off on his own, with Lysander, who is, you know, the Sovereign's grandson, to go take care of him and be away from the war. Mustang and Darrow being together, having a son. You know, Severo having married Victra. Like, everyone's kind of getting their happy ending, but the story was so bleak that, I mean, millions, if not billions of people are dead. The society has been overthrown, so they have to establish a new government. The Moon Lords are pissed because Darrow basically backstabbed them, blew up their own docks to take advantage of their ships. And the Ash Lord is still pissed off. He's sitting over by Venus or wherever he's at. So he's going to want revenge. So obviously the future is not going to be necessarily good. I mean, they overthrew the Golds. That's a good thing. But there's going to be another war to come. And Iron, Gold, and Dark Age, as I've heard, get more dark. It's probably going to be not great for a lot of people. And I think they even mentioned the term Dark Age as a point of like, if you overthrow the Golds, like you're gonna start a Dark Age. Like what do you think is gonna happen if you turn society upside down? So that's where these next trilogy books are gonna explore. So I'm super excited to see that. But I hope you all enjoyed this a little bit different setup for this book trilogy, this Morningstar review. I think moving forward, I'll probably try to do things like this where I do spoiler free and then spoilers if I really have some things that I want to talk about. Seeing as this was the final book in the trilogy, I really did want to mention some of my favorite parts of the trilogy as a whole and this book, Morningstar. So I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. It is now for sure one of my favorite series that I've ever read. Golden Sun being up there as one of the top books I've ever read, and I love the way that Morningstar ended. Like I said, few authors stick the landing so well, and I think Pierce Brown did a fantastic job of sticking the landing of this book. So that's going to do it for me, guys. Until next time, keep reading.